All right, you ready to plug in and crank it up? Because today we're diving into one of the loudest, fastest, and most rebellious movements in music history. We're talking punk rock. Let's do this!
So, have you ever been listening to a song and you're just like, is this ever going to end? You know, with those endless 10-minute guitar solos and lyrics that sound like they're straight out of a textbook? Well, believe it or not, back in the 1970s, a whole bunch of kids were feeling exactly the same way. They were just seriously bored. And what was their solution? You guessed it, punk rock. It's kind of like they hit the factory reset button on music. Just boom. They stripped everything down to the absolute basics. Loud guitars, super fast drums, and just pure, raw energy. Most songs, they were over and done in like 2, maybe 3 minutes. Short, fast, and right to the point. No messing around.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. Punk didn't just pop up in one spot. Nope. It basically exploded in 2 major cities at almost the exact same time. It was like 2 different teams playing the same game, but each one had its own set of rules. And those 2 cities? New York and London.
So over in New York, the whole scene was kind of like this cool, artsy experiment. You know, it was all about being creative and just having fun with the music. But then you hop across the ocean to London, and man, things were totally different. The vibe there was way more political, way more angry. Their goal wasn't just to play some songs, it was about protesting and demanding real change.
All right, let's start in New York City. So back in the 70s, some parts of the city were, well, pretty run down. But you know what that means? Cheap rent. And that was absolutely perfect for all these young artists and musicians who flocked there and basically turned entire neighborhoods into one giant creative lab.
And right at the heart of this whole scene was this tiny, dark, graffiti-covered club called CBGB's. This place became legendary, like the home for this new sound. And why? Well, the owner had this one simple rule. Anybody could get on stage, but you had to play your own songs. No cover bands. And that one rule made it the perfect place for all these brand new bands to just try stuff out.
And this is where we meet the Ramones, the band that many people called the very first true punks. And man, they had this formula that was so simple but so powerful. It was almost like a starter pack for how to be a band. You get some ripped jeans, black leather jackets, and you play music with like 3 chords tops. No guitar solos. And you play it all as fast as you possibly can. And this is so key, because they made thousands of kids watching them think, wait a minute, I could totally do that.
Okay, so now let's hop across the Atlantic over to London. And if New York was the cool art lab, London was more like an angry uprising. I mean, young people there were facing some really tough times. Not a lot of jobs, not a lot of hope, and they took all that anger and all that frustration and just poured it straight into their music.
And you want to talk about shocking? No band was more shocking than the Sex Pistols. Their whole mission, it seemed, was to just be as loud, messy, and offensive as they could possibly be. They slammed the government, got their songs banned from the radio. They pretty much caused chaos wherever they went. And the funny thing is, getting banned just made them even more popular. They wanted to get a reaction, and oh boy did they get one.
But London punk wasn't all just about shock value, you know? There was another band called The Clash, and they showed everybody that you could be angry, but you could also be smart about it. They started mixing in other kinds of music like reggae into their songs, and they wrote these really powerful lyrics about social justice and fighting against unfairness. They really proved that punk music could be a serious tool for change.
So you've got these 2 totally different scenes happening, one in New York and one in London. But here's the thing, they both seem to be working from the same secret instruction manual. It was like this punk playbook that anyone could pick up and follow. And what was the #1 most important rule in that playbook? 3 letters, DIY.
DIY. It stands for do it yourself. And this was maybe the most important idea in all of punk. It basically meant you didn't need to wait for some big record label or a fancy manager to tell you what to do. You want to start a band? Go for it, even if you can barely play your instrument. You could record your own songs right there in your garage. You could create your own magazines. They called them zines, which were basically the 1970s version of a blog or an Instagram feed. And you could put on your own shows wherever you could find a space. The bottom line? This whole DIY thing gave all the power back to the kids.
And this do-it-yourself attitude wasn't just for the music. It was huge in fashion, too. You didn't go out and buy punk clothes. You made them. You'd rip up your own jeans. You'd use safety pins as jewelry. You'd cover a leather jacket with studs and logos of your favorite bands. You'd dye your hair some crazy color like bright green or hot pink. See, the whole point wasn't to look good by normal standards.
The point was to look as different as possible and to show everyone you just did not care about their rules.
So you might be thinking, okay, this is all cool history, but why are we still talking about a music scene that happened almost 50 years ago? Well, it's because even though the original punk scene didn't last that long, its echo is still shaking things up today.
Seriously, punk's DNA is everywhere you look in music. In the 1980s, it morphed into what we call alternative rock. Then in the 90s, it was the direct inspiration for the whole grunge movement. Think of bands like Nirvana. And what about today? Well, that do-it-yourself spirit is basically the engine that runs the internet. Every YouTuber, every TikTok creator, every musician uploading their very first song to SoundCloud, they're all living out that original punk philosophy, whether they know it or not.
Look, if you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this right here. The most important message of punk is that you, yes, you, have the power to create your own stuff, your own art, your own style, your own culture. You do not need to wait around for someone else to give you permission. You just do it.
So that really only leaves one last question for you. Whether it's making music or art, starting a YouTube channel, or maybe it's something nobody's even thought of yet. What's your do-it-yourself idea going to be? Thanks for tuning in.